So it's Monday, and that means it's time for the Roundup Wrap, our weekly segment where we look back at the biggest news stories and events from the past week across Africa and beyond, especially where global developments could have a real bearing on the continent. And to help us make sense of what it all means and what it could signal for the days ahead, we're now joined by our Pan-African political commentator, Mighty Jamie. A very good morning to you, Mighty. Jamie, always good to talk to you. I hope you had a good weekend.
Morning to you, morning to all the viewers and listeners. Yes, I did have a good weekend, late Sunday because of the AFCON final. But here
Gosh,
we
I
are.
tell you, there was so much football, and AFCON seemed to have gone on forever, but it was a good ending, I think.
It was a good dramatic ending. What a game, what drama, what sensationalism. It's going to be one for the ages. I'm sure the soccer analysts will be talking about it ad nauseum.
And another event that people will be talking about ad nauseum, the Ugandan elections. Surprise, surprise, Yoweri Museveni wins again. What is interesting for me is ever since he became president 1,000 years ago, his popularity at the polls has been in steady decline, much like the ANC in South Africa, except for one freak year, 2011, where he raised it up to 68%. But 2006, 60%, 2016, 61%, 2021, 58%. What did he do right that he miraculously got 71% this year? I mean, that would suggest that either he walks on water or I don't know what he did.
Peter, you're very tongue in cheek this morning. Well, I must just be blunt and say that it does not look to be that there was any credibility whatsoever with the elections in Uganda for a variety of reasons. The electoral environment was not favorable. The internet shutdown, I think, was a form of trying to prevent people from mobilizing and organizing. And, I think this is just a continuation of the trend that we saw in Tanzania, where the ballot stuffing may have been too zealous this time around because they were trying to maybe close a gap that was much bigger than in the previous instances where they could comfortably win with low margins. I think in this instance, there was so much desperation, perhaps, that they had to stuff the ballot boxes so much more. And it really puts Uganda in a very funny position in terms of the health of the democratic project in Uganda because there is none. I mean, Museveni came in talking about people should not hold on to power until they're dead or whatever his quote was. And now he is proving to be that very same person. And, his legacy is going down as somebody who is definitely compromised. And he has so many family members who are involved in the administration of the state of Uganda that it looks as if they are preparing and building up for dynasty there, and is taking me back to those Ali Bongo periods. And it looks as if that's the only way now that Uganda will have any transition is if at some point there is a coup as opposed to a democratic election, because what is happening with Bobby Wine is seemingly very, eerily similar to what happened to previous challenges to Museveni. And if you recall, I can't remember his name right now. I think it's Kisi Ege, if I'm not
Kisa
mistaken.
Besigye.
He was, yes, he was challenging Museveni for decades, going in and out of jail, getting international attention. But because of the nature of the dictatorship, he then became this figure who occupies that role, but has no real pathway to power. So, yeah, I don't think it's necessarily healthy for Uganda that it's going this particular direction. And they've had a few candidates there who have been showing how absurd the gerontocracy moment is, because there's even a gentleman there who won, I think, a seat in one of the constituencies who does not look as if he's mentis compis or can actually be operating, a car, a vehicle, a computer, but all of a sudden he's being, voted in this peculiar process, also with very high margins. So the margins to me are not indicative of any credibility whatsoever, and it's so uncomfortable to have to say that he won this election when it seems so patently obvious that this is a continuation of some of the incidents that we've seen across Africa The African
So I guess
Union
this is yet
rushed.
another test for Africa's leaders at the African Union. They're fully aware of the things that go on in these countries across the continent around elections, and yet they seem powerless to deal with their fellow members.
Powerless or unwilling, Peter, because I think it's a test indeed, but it's one that they failed and they failed spectacularly. I looked at social media and I was looking at the reactions that were coming from various entities. But when the African Union issued that congratulatory statement, it seemed as if all of the youth of Africa, and here I'm using youth very loosely to mean people under the age of 35 or 40, whichever one you prefer, but they were very, very offended and very, very aggrieved at the fact that the African Union took a stronger and clearer moral position on the issue of Venezuela than they did on the issue of Uganda. And seeing some of the congratulatory messages which started trickling in yesterday, many people were pushing back towards that. So if there was a test for the African Union as an institution that it's supposed to hold democratic norms, standards, and values, it failed that test right now. And perhaps we'll have a legitimacy crisis down the road, because how do you continue to claim to be an institutional leader at a continental level in a continent which has a median age of 20 or so, when those people do not recognize your authority and view you as part of the problem in and of itself. So it was a failure for the African Union. It was a failure for some states as well, which claim to stand up for democratic values and principles. We're in a very weird period right now in Africa where there's a war in Sudan. There's a crisis of democracy in Tanzania, Uganda, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, just to name a few. And we have African nations that are very vocal on the international stage, but are unwilling to really call out the UAE for supporting the rapid support forces in Uganda, in Sudan, unwilling to call out their peers here. And we have an African charter which has signed and ratified by all of these African nations, an African charter on democracy, elections, and governance. And they never followed that. And then they said that the African peer review mechanism would be the mechanism that would really improve democracy in Africa. And that too is failing. So at this point, the institutions have been hollowed out, they've failed, and I don't think they have any legitimacy when it comes to commentary on free and fair elections in Africa.
All right, let's stay in the region. Tanzania, President Samia Suluhu Hassan expressed regret over the internet shutdown in October's elections last year and the 6-day crackdown. I don't think she said sorry for killing people, and hasn't told us how many people died. And although she's pardoned over 1,700 people, I'm pretty sure that most people are still not satisfied until some kind of admission comes through. And I wonder if this isn't trying to do a little bit of PR internationally, because Tanzania has been taking hits, hasn't it?
It has been taking hits. And I mean, all of this commentary that she made is typically something that we would respond by saying, cry me a river, because these were self-inflicted actions. So Tanzania has been taking a big hit, because in this particular election, and it may still very well happen for Uganda as well, the observer missions were very harsh in their reflections and reports on what happened in Tanzania. And as such, I think that the international community definitely backed off, and Tanzania has been struggling to get some support that it has been enjoying in the previous years. And it may very well be that tourists have trickled to a certain extent, and it's justifiably so, because we have seen or heard, activists say that there were about 3,000 people who were killed during that particular election. We saw the extent of repression and suppression, including these arrests that now she's trying to pardon people for. So it is a little bit too late, and I don't think it's going to fix the fundamental issues. My colleagues in Tanzania have said that it's back to business as usual. Life does go on. Unfortunately, even in failed or failing states, people will still send their kids to school. They will still go to work. There will still be tuk-tuks and all of that, and or trot-trots and all of that on the road. But unfortunately, in terms of the democratic project and the stability or the credibility of the leadership of the people of Tanzania as it stands right now, they are on some kind of a PR exercise because they fell so much from grace in the last election. And I think that's all that this is. She understands now that she made a big mistake in terms of the credibility side of things, and she's trying to fix it. Whether or not anybody will buy that, I don't think so, because of the fact that there still is no accountability for what happened, and there's still no transparency as to who was killed, why were they killed, by whom. And that's something that is necessary not only for the principles of natural justice and procedural justice, but also for the sake of the people being able to understand whether or not they can really trust this administration going forward, and what reforms will be necessary to prevent it happening again.
So, what's your take on Guinea? General Mamadi Doumbouya sworn in as president. This, of course, after he seized power in 2021 in a military coup. He promised that he wasn't going to run for the presidency, as they do. He did, and won by an overwhelming victory, we're told. Your thoughts on this? I mean, it sounds almost like Hosni Mubarakish, where a soldier becomes president and you know what happens next.
Yeah, I think we just have a new dictator on the continent. This is what it looks like. From the period of the coup up until now, we've basically seen him position himself to be able to then claim that his current hold on power has legitimacy. As you know, whenever there is a coup, whenever there's a junta leading a country, there's a lot of pushback from the regional actors. There's a lot of pushback from the international community. He's taken very strategic moves. You know, he's distanced himself from the alliance of Sahel states, and he's tried to play it cool in respect to some of the geopolitical tensions which come about as a result of those type of alliances. But when it comes to evaluating this particular, transition to power, it looks as if we do have a new dictator on the continent. And maybe he'll be Mugabe, and maybe, he'll be Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings. I mean, the options are they're still divergent, but as it pertains to a democratic project, this is not really a real democratic project, if you were to ask me.
Mighty Jamie, there was so much more we could have talked about. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but as always, great talking to you, and have a great week ahead, and we'll chat on Monday.
You too, Peter, and a great week to all the listeners and viewers.
All right, that's our regular commentator who rounds up the week that was. Mighty Jamie, making sense of the Ugandan elections and also what's happened in Guinea and Tanzania. There were so many other stories, of course, but sadly we ran out of time. It's 6:30. It's time for your news headlines. Here's Jolene Tulongwepe.